Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Your home for all content Lord of the Rings home. Today I have a lot of information to bring to you about Glyphs. I just got out, well, a little bit ago, just got out of the developer Q&A where they invited me plus some other content creators, Thorn, Torm, Teacher, and some community members, a lot of people from LOTR.gg, to kind of give you a behind the scenes look of the meat and bones of the Glyph system. And so I think primarily in this video, I'm going to focus on things people had a lot of concerns about. So the use of normal energy to farm glyphs and how we are getting glyphs, gold, and speed. And then we'll talk a little bit about kind of some other things that we learned. But I will also be I've basically made essentially this FAQ info sheet that's got a lot of questions and answers in there about specific details. And I'm going to post that probably on the community tab of my channel. We'll probably end up posting it to Reddit. I'm going to post it in my Discord as well. And then I know SigSig actually already has something up on LOTR.gg that's got answers to those questions as well. So there should be a bunch of people basically posting information, and you'll be able to find stuff out. But we've got a lot of stuff that we can talk about today, and I want to talk about some of the stat stuff as well. So let's just get right into talking about normal energy. I'm going to kind of avoid talking about a lot of the stuff that they have in here, and the FAQ won't have a lot of this stuff either, but you have to use normal energy on light and shadow nodes to farm glyphs. The intent is that you are going to be receiving a lot of glyphs from a lot of different places. Yes, you can farm them with normal energy on light and shadow nodes, but you should also be getting them possibly from the shop, from the raids, but also, I think another big place that you're going to be getting them is actually in that 4-hour chest, the one that you can get character shards of in the game, that daily chest. Well, it's not daily, it's every 4 hours. There's going to be glyphs rolled out in there. Again, so they emphasize that the intent is that you are going to be getting a bunch of glyphs. That's not what's going to be the issue. That's not what's going to be the grind. The grind is going to be getting that perfect glyph, right? It's going to be making sure that you have the exact right stats. So let's talk a little bit about stats. Here is a table showing the primary stats for the different glyphs you can have, right? So health, damage, armor, focus, resistance. Slot 1 is only health, 2 is damage, and 3 is armor, I think. And then 4, 5, and 6, the slots there are any number of these. It's in the sheet here that shows you exactly what you can get here. Yeah, slot 4, 5, and 6. So you refer to that, but these are the actual stats. And so at gear tier 10, if you've got gear tier 10 character and you equip a level 10 glyph and it's a health glyph, the primary stat will be 3894, right? So that's additional health that is being added onto that gear tier 10 character. If it is a level 10 glyph, but you have a gear tier 5 or 6 character, let's say 5, then this primary stat is only going to add a 1393 health, right? This is interesting. It's actually a good amount of focus and resistance on these glyphs as primary stats. So this is something that we should think about. We unfortunately did not get any we didn't get any formulas for how armor works or for how focus and resistance checks work. They said it was pretty standard RPG sort of stuff, but this seems like a lot of focus. And the intent with the primary stats, because they're just essentially adding value, adding these flat values, that it's comparable to what you would get at that gear tier anyway. So it's kind of just like a little additional boost on top of your gear. Let's talk quickly about secondary stats here. Okay, so these are the secondary stats you can get. There's the minimum here, the maximum you can get, and then the total max here. So let's say you are going to level, you get all your secondary stats, which also get a roll. So let's say you take a glyph from level 1 to 2. You're going to get your first secondary stat, right? That's what it says on this leveling thing here. Yep, so go to 1 to 2, you reveal that secondary stat. It can be any one of these with equal probability, if that makes sense. So when you're going from 1 to 2, it's got an equal chance of being % health, % damage, % armor, % focus, any of these, right? When you're going from 2 to 3, you're getting that secondary stat revealed, right? It's still an equal chance of any of them minus the one that you got as your first stat. So you can't get a percent health stat as your first secondary stat, and then roll again and get another percent health stat. Does that make sense? And then you can kind of roll anywhere in between these ranges. So for percent health, let's say, you could roll anywhere between 0.5 and 1 with equal probability. And the granularity there is essentially to 2 decimal places. So this is actually a good example with percent damage. So you can roll anywhere between 0.75 to 1.5, and 1.49% is just as likely as 0.75% or 1.5%. Okay? This kind of leads me into talking about speed, right? So you can see that the total max speed is actually 45. That is revised down from 90. They made some changes after doing some testing, and the total max is now 45. This is if you have a maxed value. So like you roll into that secondary 5 times at the max value across all of your glyphs, this is what you get, 45 speed. So obviously people are not going to be getting anywhere near to that with how granular this system is and the equal probability that you get. That's interesting. 45 speed, half of what it was for 90. I feel a lot better about this. I think this is going to be more about tuning turn order for sure. I don't think it's going to be a runaway stat. You may be wondering, what does 0.5 speed mean? Well, that actually does come into play. So, a character that has 0.5 speed over another character is going to go first. And I also learned something that new that I didn't think was in the game, but it is in the game. They have turn meter overage in this game. So what that means is that if you get excess turn meter, like let's say there's some skill or that gives you turn meter, whatever, you go over 100%, the character with the highest turn meter overage is going to go first. So the character that got to 130% turn meter is going to go before the character that got to 125% turn meter, right? When that 130% turn meter character goes, if somebody, if they give more turn meter to somebody on their team too, and now, that new character is over the character that was at 125% turn meter, then it's just the character who has the most turn meter overage is going to go first. It's not who reaches 100 first, who has the most turn meter overage. Importantly, when that character takes its turn, that turn meter overage is wiped out. What I mean by that is basically resets back to 0. You do not preserve the fact that you had 30% extra turn meter over 100. It goes back down to 0% and you start over again. Hopefully that clears some things up. The decimal points, I know it looks a little weird, but I think it will actually end up making a big difference overall. So that's kind of the deal with speed. It doesn't seem like a runaway stat with me. It's obviously going to be very nice, and I think people are still going to be rolling a lot for speed. But I think the point here is that these other stats are actually decently competitive. And one thing to note is that these are not clamped to gear tier like the primary stats were. They mentioned this in the Glyph article as well, but I just want to make sure to reiterate this point actually. They're not clamped. So if you upgrade a Glyph to, let's say, level 10, and let's say, just for the sake of argument here, you have 45 speed on that Glyph, right? You can take that Glyph, take it off of a gear tier 10 character where it was primary stat was getting, the full benefit there. Put it on a gear tier 5 character. The primary stat is going to be at the gear tier 5 level, but you're still going to be getting that 45 speed. They do this, and maybe speed was a bad example to choose here. They do this because these are percent based, right? So it's already scaling off of the character's current stats at that gear tier, and it's not flat values like the primary stats. That's just a little, I guess, behind the scenes sort of thing. All right, let's talk about gold, how much this stuff costs. This is another table here. Let me blow it up a little bit so you can see it. Again, I'm going to be posting all of this. These tables specifically are going to go in my Discord and the resources channel. I know SigSig put them up on LOTR.gg though as well. So you should be able to access them. I'm sure they're going to go on Reddit as well. So download them just so you have access to them. This is awesome that the developers actually let us have these. I mean, we're going to find them out eventually, but they basically told us right out of the gate. And also, I guess this is a good time to mention, thank you so much, CG, for letting us in on doing this developer Q&A with, community members, other content creators. This was a great behind the scenes kind of look, and it wasn't insubstantial. They gave us a lot of stuff to talk about. They didn't give us everything that we wanted to talk about. That's okay. We actually got a lot of information, I would say, more than I was expecting, I would say. So let's talk about gold. Is this going to be a massive gold sink? And the intent is no. And so you can kind of see that with their upgrade to sell cost here. So They basically have 1 to 5, right? That's going to reveal all of the secondary stats you could get on that particular glyph. It's only after that that you start to get additional rolls. 7 to 10, I believe, right, is where you get the additional rolls on the secondary stats. So you also start using these spells. Talk about that in a second. But you can essentially reveal all of the secondary stats for 2,300 gold per glyph, right? And then you could sell that. You can sell that glyph for 2070 gold. What that means is that you basically get back 90% of the gold that you put into checking to see what the secondary stats of this glyph are. And that is in line with the statement that they told us, which is basically, we want to give you a bunch of glyphs. We want to give you a bunch of glyphs. That's not the grind. The grind is getting the perfect glyph. So one thing to note there is that you do have a glyph inventory. It is 500. You can have 500 glyphs plus 6 times the amount of characters that you have unlocked. So basically, you don't need to worry about, as long as you are under that 500 sort of limit, you can always put glyphs on your characters. Those do not essentially count towards your limit, but they have to be unlocked. Let's talk a little bit about spells. This is something we actually didn't get as much information on. We actually did just get an update, though. So these enchantment scrolls, I believe they've got a picture here. Let me scroll down. These ones, these are obviously the most common ones that we're seeing here. And I think Torm did the math, 32, 48. Oh, I think he did the math. 16, 32, 48, 56, 60. So you need 60 enchantment scrolls to go from 6 to 10. And then it's only later on that you start to need these illusion and sorcery scrolls. And you only need 4 sorcery scrolls to go from 9 to 10. So how do you get them? Well, it appears that for these enchantment scrolls here, you get those from guild and personal raid reward tracks. We didn't see any specifics there, but that's where you're going to acquire them. These illusion scrolls here, these one, you need them to get a little bit higher, but you don't need as many. You're going to be able to get those on the personal reward track and in the supplies for regular raid currency. So they're going to go into the raid store. That's with the gold raid currency. These sorcery ones, which are the ones that are the hardest to get, that you need to go from 9 to 10. You're going to get those in the raid store for mithril raid coins, the blue raid coins that are very, very hard to get at the moment. So that's just a little bit about that. I'm actually really happy with the decision here to basically give you most of your gold back to just check whether a glyph was worth it. Then you can sell it if you don't want it. And it's basically about just fine-tuning your glyphs in that way. Let's talk a little bit about raids. I'm doing kind of a little bit of rambling here because I just want to get all this information out. But the idea here with glyphs is that the raids were essentially tuned with glyphs in mind. It's going to play a cutscene. Maybe we're just going to skip that. The raid was tuned with glyphs in mind. What that means is that they're not going to like update the raids to accommodate glyphs. And essentially what the developers said was, if you get a good set of glyphs for, a character, that should on average take your team up from one difficulty to the next. So I think the idea here is that, like, yes, those difficulty 3 teams that you have, well, if you put a good set of glyphs on them, like not a bad set, and like the right set, sets that work with those characters, you should be able to go from, let's say, difficulty 3 to difficulty 4. Not sure how difficulty 5 is going to turn out, but that's essentially what that means for raids, which is important because, again, a lot of this spell stuff is going to be coming from raids. So it's kind of feeding on each other. One thing I guess I'll mention here, as opposed to anywhere else, is the intent is for glyphs to sort of preserve the meta. Like, glyphs are not suddenly going to, make Isengard better than Elrond, right? It's meant to kind of boost and progress your teams, but preserve overall balance in the game, if that makes sense. So the actual menu for glyphs and just the UI stuff looked pretty good. The favoriting that they talked about, your favorite sort of sets on characters, I want to add a clarification there. It is not like Swigo, where you can kind of save like individual mods to a character, like, oh, I want these 4 or 5 mods or 6 mods on this character to do this specific thing. That's not the case. You're favoriting sets. So like, let's say for Elrond, you really want to get a good Lembas set on him, right? Well, you essentially favorite the Lembas set, and then it shows the Lembas set at the top when you're in the kind of glyph menu, if so to speak, right? It is not saving individual glyphs so much. It is kind of prioritizing glyphs that you care about for that particular character. There is no filtering. It's sorting right now. So you don't get to filter the glyphs. You can sort them by whatever kind of secondary or primary stat or level or whatever, a bunch of different things, but there is no filtering, I think, like they have in Swigo. Some other things is you currently cannot see what individual stats glyphs are giving your opponents in, let's say, Arena, but you should be able to see, I believe, the sets that they are using. One thing about raids that I need to mention quickly before I forget: glyphs are not exhausted with raid attempts. So what that means, this is my understanding, is that you can do a raid attempt with a team, swap out those glyphs to another team, and then use those glyphs on another team to do another raid attempt. I think that's very interesting. It's obviously going to come down to a kind of a cost-benefit analysis, especially with glyph removal and all of that, and whether you can afford to keep doing this. We'll have to dig into the details there. There's a lot of details to dig into, but that is an interesting tidbit that I think is very different than other games, especially kind of in our proximity like Swigo, right? Let me just quickly see. Oh, let me talk about Lembas set. I think this is we'll talk about Lembas and summons and some other kind of specific mechanics, and then I'll end the video and we'll post the FAQ, which I think is probably a better format for that type of thing. So the Lembas set gives you 1 stamina at the start. That phrasing, gain 1 stamina, means it's going to a random ability, but it prioritizes abilities that are currently not full. So it's going to choose an ability that is not full as opposed to one that is, but it is random. And that applies for when you get that random ability energy after you use an ability the first time. So I'll give you an example. It's the same example I put in the FAQ. Is essentially, let's say you have Elrond's Special 1, his heal, on cooldown, and you just used his big wave. Okay, so that means that you used his big wave the first time, so you're going to generate 1 stamina according to the Lembas set, right? Let's see if I can just... First time each ability is used, gain 1 stamina, right? That stamina, it does not necessarily go into the wave ability because the heal is also on cooldown. It can go to either. That's a little bit of a clarification there. This true damage, basically true damage is can't crit. It's not affected by things that reduce it. So like it can't be blocked or anything like that. And the true damage is based off of the damage of the attacker. Something that's still not quite clear to me is like, if this character inflicts a bane, but the damage ability itself, or the ability itself doesn't do damage, does this still do damage with this true damage? I think the answer is yes, but I'm not 100% on that. We will, of course, update things on the FAQ info sheet when we hear about that, one way or the other. Their idea here is that, again, you should be choosing sets first, then primary stats, then secondary stats, and you should be doing, ideally, 1 major set and 1 minor set. That's sort of their design intention. Of course, you can do 3 minor sets, but that's what their intention is at the moment. Let's talk about summons. Summons are affected by the stats that they get from the main character, the summoner gets from glyphs, but it does not get the set bonus. Okay, and it's also not clear to me if it's like 1 for 1. So if I put like 3,000 health glyph on one of my summoner, does that mean that the summoned character gets 3,000 health also, or is there some reduced amount? Unclear on that front, but you do get more stats on your summoned character based on what glyphs you put on your summoner. Let's see, some quality of life stuff. I mean, it looks really good. I'm not gonna lie, it does look really good. There's maybe a little bit of you can't see your opponent's stats there, and like there is no filtering so much as it's sorting. But other than that, I actually think it looks really good, and I like the way that they've laid it out, and I like that they've designed. They mentioned this in the talk, and this is something I've talked about previously. Is like secondary stats are all multiplicative, so you don't have to worry about whether a flat stat on a secondary is better than the percent increase on a secondary, which a lot of games do, including Swigo. Let's see. I think that's everything I want to talk about at the moment. Obviously, if you have more questions, feel free to pop them down in the comments. Come into the Discord, ask them. I will try to answer them. And then take a look at the FAQ info sheet. We're going to continuously update that with more information that we get. But thanks again to CG for giving us this opportunity to kind of see behind the scenes and get this information out to you early. I know a lot of people in the community are eager for it, and I'm glad that they invited a bunch of people, not just content creators, but community members, to kind of get that info out. That's it from me. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.